All right, guys, it's time for the club. Today we have special guest ETR's Drew Dinkmeyer coming in hot after his beloved Nikola Jokic took down the NBA championship with my formerly beloved Denver Nuggets. We're going to talk to him about these playoffs, about what it means for Jokic's legacy, what it means for my Nikola Jokic Cosmic that I still have on Top Shot. Also might talk a little NBA draft and hear some of Dink's thoughts about being in the best ball streets here super early in 2023. Let's do it. Let me get my screen up here. Drew Dinkmeyer. Did you shed a tear? Did you get emotional when the Nuggets won the championship? Did you feel that invested?
It was really strange for me because I was in a Chicago bar and I grew up a Chicago sports fan rooting for the Chicago Bulls. I have never lived in Chicago. I just happened to be there on an ETR trip, and it was just strange. But no tears were shed. Silva does have some compromising photos of me that I'm sure one late night during the NFL season while he's drowning his sorrows in matchups, I'm sure he'll release on Twitter.
There you go. Well, I feel like now everyone has all of the blackmail on him getting all, emotional at Taylor Swift concerts. So it's kind of mutually assured destruction at this point.
Exactly.
Let's bring in our old pal. Speaking of Nikola
look at
Jokic,
the shirt.
Look at this shirt. Peter Jennings. Oh, baby. Is that new or have you had this for a while?
Ashley got it for me, actually. And yeah, I wore it to game one, which was fun. Got some laughs, but yeah, how amazing is that? Like, that picture is so funny,
so good,
and
so good.
I think. Sorry, I know I'm a couple minutes late, but yeah, Jokic's run was just unreal, and I think the big thing that changed was his diet and exercise, and that's what enabled him to play, 40 plus minutes at a really high level. So kudos to Jokic.
What has been the atmosphere in Denver, boots on the ground, Pete? Because our guy, Nick Rudman, was tossing a lot of shade, says he was at the Denver airport, didn't see any jerseys, didn't realize the championship had just happened. So are people actually excited there in my hometown?
Oh, super stoked. Yeah, dude, Denver airport it's an international airport. It's not a lot of people from Denver flying through the airport. A lot of people, it's a major hub, and a lot of people have layovers there. And of course there are some Denver people, but yeah, the vibe is great. The parade was insane. I mean, Denver has kind of bandwagon fans. We're good Broncos fans, but we really supported the Avalanche super well, and it's been nuts here. So it's been fun. There's some diehards, but we've had, even now, I mean, Denver's a huge percentage of transplants too. So, but
that's what I was about to say. I feel like there aren't a lot of locals. It's a lot of people who moved there as adults or different things.
Yeah, but the games were insane, and like the energy. I thought Denver had obviously we have the biggest home court advantage with the altitude, but just being there, it was super loud, and I think people definitely it's a great time to be a Denver sports fan. I mean, we've had the Avalanche, now the Nuggets. Wyndham Clark just won the U.S. Open, who's a big Colorado guy, so it's been pretty sweet.
And Dink, you were talking about on your ETR NBA pod too about how there's been a lot of coping from, is it NBA Twitter or people who were Jokic doubters or said this Nuggets team could never win it all? What are they spinning the narrative as now after this championship?
Yeah, I mean, the goalposts just move consistently for Jokic. It's been that he shouldn't have deserved a potential third MVP because he hadn't had playoff success. Then he has the playoff success, and it's like, oh well, they beat the lowest number of seeds that they could have potentially played during the course of the playoffs because the Heat were an 8 seed getting to the finals. And there's just always going to be moving goalposts on this stuff because he's hard to comprehend. And it's a lot of cognitive dissonance. It's difficult for people when they form an opinion on something to want to get away from the initial opinion that they formed. It's very uncomfortable. So I think a lot of people just were late to the Jokic game in terms of understanding just how good he was. A lot of people that were saying, oh yeah, he's an all-star. He's a good player in the league, but weren't understanding that, no, he's the best player in the league. And he's the best player in the league by a margin that I think people are still coming to grips with and still uncomfortable with. And so, yeah, there's been a ton of cope all along NBA Twitter, all along NBA media, Nick Wright, Kendrick Perkins, like a bunch of prominent analysts out there that just got it wrong from the jump. And I think it's just because he doesn't look like the way dominance normally looks. And I think that's hard for people to grasp.
And do you think this team is set up to kind of have a bit of a dynasty? They could snap off a few of these. Like, I don't know enough about their team construction. Are they able to keep this rolling?
Yeah, I think the big thing that wasn't really talked about as much was the fact that this could have been like year 3 of a dynasty, if not for Jamal Murray's ACL injury that cost them 2 playoff runs, essentially. Before that, they were kind of trending in that direction. They were the up-and-coming new young team that we were really excited about in the NBA, and then we got robbed of 2 playoff runs from that. So they're set up incredibly well. They've got all of their core players back next year. We'll see if they bring Bruce Brown back. That's the one kind of notable situation that they have to deal with. He can make a lot more money by going anywhere else. Denver has limitations in terms of how much they can pay him. We'll see. And then Jeff Green is the other guy that they probably won't bring back because it's just expensive on the vet minimum, and leadership and, off the court intangible stuff. That's important. But in terms of on the court play, he was a role player. That's something that they can replace with what they've got kind of waiting in the wings with Peyton Watson and some other guys. And they've got draft picks coming as well this year. I think they're set up incredibly well. I think no matter what anybody does in the offseason, I think they should be the favorites. I think they've now shown that they can defend at an NBA championship level as well. And I think the new CBA is going to make it more difficult for teams to come out of nowhere to challenge them. It's really making the rules so you have to build from within, which Denver's done effectively. And so I don't think you're as likely to see, like, you'll see a lot of movement this offseason because it's like kind of the last offseason you can do it. But there, once you get into these first and second aprons, there's not much you can do spending wise to really shore up the team. So Phoenix made a big move earlier this week. They're going to have a tough time rounding out their roster unless they're able to trade DeAndre Ayton for multiple role player types. So there's going to be a lot of depth challenges to teams. And now teams, it's the new CBA is going to require kind of a slower build, and teams staying together longer. And I think that's all in Denver's favor when all their main guys are like 25 to 29, like perfect window for their prime.
Andy, how do you think Denver would have fared against, say, either the Celtics or the Bucks? And it's hard to like do that hypothetical because they lost and they weren't good enough to advance there. But I mean, I assume some people on Twitter and in the media are saying, hey, well, they got to play the Heat, so of course they should have won.
Yeah, I mean, I think like obviously it's hard to say, and like who knows? I think they would have won regardless. I think they were a bit of a buzzsaw. Like no one really gave them a scare in the West, and kind of the Minnesota series don't really care about that, but like Phoenix, people thought very highly of Phoenix, and I don't think it was really particularly close. And the Lakers, kind of same thing, and I don't think it wasn't. They swept them. I'm not sure that any team would have been able to hang with them really at all. I think like there's a world. I think you can like make the case that they could have lost to any of those teams in a 7-game series. But I think if you play, you played 100 times, they're heavy favorites against anyone.
It's interesting thinking back to just doing all the playoff drafts on Underdog and even seeing how sentiment played out in those streets where we did have Giannis flip Jokic and ADP despite Jokic starting at the 101. And basically any Nuggets onslaught stack that you wanted to do, assuming you had the 101 or 102, was just completely doable. Like you were never boxed out of anything because people were just, I guess it's because the Nuggets were so deep at wing too. But it is just interesting to know, like everyone kind of just shrugged their shoulders at the Nuggets heading into these playoffs and didn't ever want to be like, no, this is the best team. I want to make a big bet on them.
Yeah,
I wanted to go back.
They weren't even favored. They weren't even favored against, Phoenix, and barely favored. They were barely favored against Phoenix and barely favored against the Lakers. Like people weren't expecting them to be able to get through things. I see Josh in the chat talking about the Heat, the Lakers beating the Heat. The Lakers beat a Heat team that had Goran Dragic hurt, Bam Adebayo hurt. That's why they got some smack about like their championship against the Heat in the bubble. The Heat were really, really beat up by the time they got to the finals there. It was like Jimmy versus the world. But yeah, it's I think things would have looked differently against Boston and Milwaukee. I think they offered different challenges. But I think the one thing about the Heat is they never quit. And so like there are games that Denver would have would have probably put away Boston or Milwaukee earlier than they were able to put away Miami, just because Miami just doesn't stop playing. And as we saw with Boston, they stopped playing. They kind of routinely stopped playing. And then we saw Milwaukee had all sorts of crunch time issues with Giannis's confidence at the free throw line and stuff against Miami that perhaps could have carried over in the same type of situation against Denver.
I think it probably would have been a closer series with either of those two. Just like, I think to a certain extent, and I don't think this is revolutionary, and I kind of still feel bad for thinking it, but it kind of feels like the Heat caught lightning in a bottle, and like I wouldn't bet on them, and I don't think people would to see them back in this position again next year. And so like I think there's probably still a case to be made that the Bucks are going to be a much harder series, and that was just like a really, really weird 5 games. And probably that series goes 6 or 7, but I still think the Nuggets would win.
I wanted to go back to what Drew said, and this could have been a dynasty already for the Nuggets. When they first traded for Aaron Gordon, that lineup that had Will Barton at the time over KCP, that was the best net rating for any 5 players, their starting lineup, by like a large margin. I think it was like 15 or 20 games, and then Murray tore his ACL. So they already looked like, arguably the best team then. And Jokic certainly took another leap, especially with his fitness. And then Bruce Brown, this is classic. You guys will laugh at me, but I have to get it in. He's a member at my club at Cherry Creek. He was the group in front of us playing with my buddy. I'm so happy for him. We've talked to him a decent bit. I mean, he made a huge bet on himself, obviously with the player option. He can get a lot more money, and he is really important. I think he's the type of player that a lot of teams realize that they need. He's a very athletic wing stopper who can guard well above his size. One really important thing I think that's gotten trendy and people are evaluating more now, but the length that he has a 6'9" wingspan, really enables him to play bigger. And I think one other thing that really helped his stock going forward and why more teams might look at him is he played backup point guard, which I think was a really interesting way to kind of leverage his skill set. And that was big for the Nuggets when Murray would sit. Obviously you have Jokic, who's like a point center, just God mode player, but like Brown brought the ball up a lot, initiated the offense a lot, did a lot of dribble handoffs, and showed even more versatility to his game. So I could see him getting a huge bag. But he did say when they won the championship at the parade, 1 more year. I don't know. If I were him, I would secure the bag. I mean, he hasn't made like a ton of money. I mean, he's made nothing. He's been nothing. So like this is his chance. He's at the right age. Like he should be taking a huge bag. And I do think that's not great for the Nuggets, but we'll be able to figure out more pieces. And I don't know.
The interesting thing there is if you see like the Bobby Portis situation, which was Bobby Portis signed a 1-year deal under similar circumstances and then got a very sizable extension the next year. And it's kind of like a wink, we'll take care of you in the future type thing. I don't know if we'll see anything like that from Denver, but
I hope so.
Hopefully for the Nuggets' sake. They've created a culture though that's really enticing to play in, and everybody seems to really love playing with each other in that locker room. Very different than a number of teams around the league, and I think it's one of the kind of hidden values or things that we don't put as much stock in. But you look at the teams that ended up kind of getting to the finals, they really seem to like playing with each other, just genuinely. And this year, some of the teams that were the most talented teams had issues at different times in terms of trusting one another, whether it was Boston or Golden State that started the year with the Jordan and Draymond incident. So, or Philly, which had consistently has issues seemingly with players enjoying playing with one another. So it's one of the hidden values of a culture that you create where people really enjoy playing the game with one another.
Speaking of Draymond, he's definitely going Lakers, right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think he's going back to Golden State. I think they're going to keep him, but we'll see.
Okay.
I think they're really going to be set on trying to make one last run for Golden State. Those guys, that was a pretty sour taste in their mouth for how things went at the end. So I don't think they're ready to hang it up quite yet.
So just sign like on a more advantageous team deal, most likely.
I think he'll still get paid. I think it's a question of the years. I think they're basically going to really put the feet to the fire on the front office for making sure that they pay the players who raise the valuation of that team so strongly. And I think the ownership there has been amenable to that, has been open to that. So I think that'll be likely.
You think Myers leaving changes anything or not at all?
I think it probably changes. I mean, I think I think long term it's a big loss. I think what Bob Myers does in terms of bridging the gap between player and front office is really huge. A lot of the players have talked about that. Iguodala and Draymond Green on their individual podcasts have talked about that. So I think long term that's a concern if Mike Dunleavy isn't the same in terms of being able to do that. But I think short term it's more going to be like kind of a player's decision between Dre, Steph, and Clay, like what they want to do for the next 1 to 2 years. And I think that's going to win the day in Golden State, but we'll see.
Yeah, makes sense.
I wanted to kick it to everyone, and specifically want your opinion, Drew, because Andy, I agree. Miami definitely ran hot, and they were a hard team to kind of model and project throughout the playoffs, especially after the regular season that they had. But ton of credit to their coaching. And I do think there's one move where I would consider a team on par or similar to the Nuggets, and that's if the Heat are able to flip Hero and other assets for Damian Lillard. I mean, Lillard, Butler, and Bam is a pretty compelling trio, and Lillard has flaws. He doesn't guard as well, but that's a perfect setup with that team. And really the one thing that really hurt Miami in this series, they just don't have enough playmaking. I mean, they were able to stay in games with Vincent doing some stuff and Lowry, but Dame's offense would immediately transform them into a damn good offense versus a really bad offense. And I think their defense and coaching could win out. That would be the scariest team, definitely more scary than the Suns are, especially if they were to keep Caleb Martin in that deal too.
Yeah, I think that deal. You have to be glad as a Heat fan that they didn't get Bradley Beal. I feel like that was huge just to dodge that bullet in a lot of ways. Like I think it could work out for Phoenix next year, but I don't know about that one. But I would agree that Dame going there would be interesting. I think there's definitely scenarios where other teams could be as good or like closer to them. I think there's something Boston could do still, but I'm just like, I think it probably involves trading Jaylen Brown and like getting a little bit more serious that the double J's just isn't good enough to do what needs to get done. Like, I don't know, with all the Zion trade rumors, like I think there's like a lot of unknown right now just in general in the league. And there's like, there's some version of things that plays out where Zion gets traded to a team and he's actually way healthier than people thought. And he was just in like a really weird situation where it just didn't work. And he just like immediately changes the dynamic of that team because he is that good. That's like, to me, that's the biggest unknown of just like, if he somehow ended up on the Celtics or something, like that could, like Zion and Jason Tatum, it would be like pretty insane.
Yeah, getting back to the Heat point, I agree with Pete wholeheartedly that Damian Lillard would change the equation. It's just difficult when Portland isn't in a situation where they're sort of held hostage by Damian, like Washington was with Bradley Beal having the no trade clause. That makes it so that Portland ultimately has to take, whatever the best offer is. And can Miami put the offer that's the best offer out there? I don't know how appealing Tyler Hero is to teams. I know Pat Riley is trying to pump him up in press conferences these days. But that's the best asset that they really have to offer. I think Beal went from like underrated to overrated back to underrated just because he's paid so much. Like he's just paid way too much. But like I think Beal's going to be a good fit for Phoenix, and I think that was a reasonable risk for them to take, just given they didn't have any other ways to add talent. I think Miami's sort of in the same boat, where if like Miami misses out on Dame, I don't know what they do, because then they're really stuck where they've got, I believe Strus and Vincent are both up, and Strus is another one of these guys. He's been on the minimum his whole career, so he's going to take as much money as he can. He's probably like a $15-16 million player a year, something like that. And so you start like adding up, like, do you want to be paying Gabe Vincent and Max Strus like $16 million a year along with Duncan Robinson with his like 20 or whatever? And you're like, is this team, like, where do you have assets to move to get better? So I think Miami is really up against it, where if they don't get Dame, I don't know what they do. Dame's a really interesting inflection point, just because you talk about like the Jaylen Brown stuff. He would be a natural kind of, swap there for a better fit next to Jason Tatum in terms of like ball handling. Really what's hurt Boston in the playoffs is like ball handling and being able to make good decisions. in key moments in games. And Jaylen Brown's handle just hasn't gotten to the point that it needs to get to. Teams have been able to kind of force him left and pick him apart in the playoffs. But yeah, it seems like Boston's pretty committed to that. The challenge with Boston is while the Jays are still in their prime, some of these really good role players that they've had, like Al Horford, like how much more are you going to be able to get out of him over the years? There's rumors that they're going to move off of Malcolm Brogdon potentially. Obviously, they did a great job getting Derek White, and Robert Williams' health is just a huge unknown each and every year. So some of these teams that have been like really good for a while, and similarly, like the Lakers, I think were a super big threat to Denver in the playoffs because they had LeBron relatively healthy and AD fully healthy. The best AD looked all year was during the playoffs. And it's just like, do we know we're going to get that come playoff time again next year? If so, the Lakers are very dangerous. But we just don't know if they're going to be able to hold up physically. And that's kind of the benefit that the Nuggets have of having Jokic, who's been one of the most durable players in the league during his entire career. And Jamal Murray, outside of the major knee injury, extremely durable in his career. And then all these other guys in their prime, which is kind of what makes them feel just safer than everybody else in terms of forecasting the future.
Yeah,
So
on
it
the
sounds like-
Suns. Or sorry, what was that?
Oh, no, I was just going to quickly frame it looking at like the 2024 title odds. Nuggets plus 460, Celtics 500, Bucks 500, Heat all the way down at plus 1800. It seems like that might be your fun long shot bet to take there of those.
It's sort of just betting on if they can get Dame. I mean, if they could get Dame, they would shoot up immediately. I think, as Pete alluded to, the combination of Dame, Jimmy, Bam, and Spo is just really, really daunting. But I don't know how they get Dame. Like, I think there's got to be a lack of suitors, and because Portland might send, especially to an Eastern Conference team, Portland might send Dame to a place that he prefers, as long as things are close in terms of the value perspective, just because everything he's done for the franchise. But if there's somebody who comes in with like real legitimate great assets that Miami just doesn't have, I don't know how Portland, would choose Miami.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. I mean, I think one on the Phoenix thing, I actually agree. I saw a lot of bad grades for Phoenix on the trade, and I get it. Beal is a big time negative asset with his contract at this point in time. But I do think he's underrated now. I think he'll be better on the catch and shoot stuff. When he played with John Wall, he was great there. But the depth is an issue, and really the Suns went all in with Durant, and they had to make this move with the second apron coming. Like, this is just pushing out even more all in. But if this doesn't work, they have no flexibility, and they're going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, for the record, I agree. I think it was the right thing for the Suns to do. I don't think I would have liked it as much for the Heat.
Well, yeah, and that's why they didn't have to give up anything. I mean, the Heat, I heard, offered like Duncan Robinson, who's another negative contract, even though he played a little better in the finals, but paying him $20 million a year. He barely played this year. Huge defensive liability, and like some, Kyle Lowry maybe to make the salaries work. They were basically saying, hey, we view it as a negative asset. We want to give you another negative thing for Bradley Beal. Whereas the Suns are like, hey, all we can do is move this Chris Paul contract. That's our best option, is to get Beal. And hopefully they can find someone. Maybe they can move Ayton. Maybe they can get some, ring chasing wings. Who knows? Like a Jeff Green. I don't know. Jeff Green will probably get money too. But I do think it's interesting. Zion would be the play for Portland. This is another trade that I think is interesting. Who says no, Dink? Number 3 pick, Anthony Simons and filler, or for Zion Williamson? Who do you like? Which side?
So I think the question mark is like, so I think Zion is just a huge wild card that I would only be making a move out of desperation for at this point. Now Portland's in a fairly desperate situation in terms of whether they're going to keep Damian Lillard or not. So I understand the thought process on that, but I think that's a deal like immediately New Orleans would feel really good about. Because it's getting certainty in terms of what they're getting compared to the unknown with Zion, and obviously it just hasn't worked out to this point in New Orleans. So I think there's good reason you could look at Zion's contract right now as a negative, but I've also been really bearish on being able to forecast his ability to be on the court, and whether that's related to effort and interest in where he's playing, or whether that's just like the challenges of that dude's body type and that explosive capability and what it means on the feet and the rest of the body and whatnot. I don't know, but that's a risk that I think I think Portland's going to be stuck where I don't think they have much that they're going to be able to bring that would potentially allure Dame, and maybe Zion's the thing that could do that and be like a backup plan to if they need to move Dame later on. So maybe that's the thing that's most compelling, as opposed to like Siakam for like a year or whatever the other options are. But I think I would rate that as a better move for New Orleans than I would for Portland, but Portland's in a little bit of a more desperate situation. Maybe Pete has, personal insight into the Portland front office.
I know. Man, my Google alerts for my cousin are pretty spicy these days. I will sidestep us a little bit here, Clay. As our NBA cultural critic, can you explain to me what's going on with the Zion stuff? I feel like this is perfectly up your alley to share on the club what's going on here, because I truly, I know vague details, but I don't know the heart of the matter here.
It's a classic case of revenge porn. That's what it seems like. That's my NBA culture critic review of the situation. I don't know. It's pretty preposterous in a multitude of ways. One being that Zion's clearly got a lot that he's juggling right now. And her account was suspended this afternoon. It's a little spicy detail.
Who's her? You got to help me out here.
It is my understanding on the matter is that it's a OnlyFans star.
You're not going to get sued for this, Clay.
for my reading, from my reading on NBA.
Clay's
Twitter.
been doing extensive research into her
Deep in the
background.
streets. Got a blog post later that we'll put out now.
Clay's starting to blush and getting hot under the collar just talking about this.
It's a crazy story, man, because there's a lot of different ways to it. What if Zion really wants to get out of New Orleans and he's using this? I mean, this woman is basically negotiating trades on his behalf on Twitter. It is incredible. She's demanding his release from New Orleans, saying that he wishes he could play in New York, which of course our boy Settlement ran off with and said that it means Zion wanted to be drafted by the Knicks all along. Who knows what's true, other than my understanding is that Zion has a child in the way and there is other women in the equation, and one is doing his bidding. And I'm not sure if she's nuking his contract potential or if she's doing him a massive favor and getting him out of a city that he does not want to play in any longer.
Wow.
That's a technical analysis.
Wow. Is it true that this lady is now the true Picasso of the trade machine and Bill Simmons has just been downgraded?
Well, she was, but then the ghost of David Stern made a phone call and her account erased from Twitter. So she's no longer doing any bidding.
The interesting thing with all of the Zion stuff, to get slightly back to the NBA here from the Real Housewives of the NBA, is Bill Simmons, what was it, 2 days ago on his podcast, was like, I have it on good authority that Zion will not be on the Pelicans. And now there's been a bunch of stuff that's come out in the last 24 hours saying we think that Zion will still be on the Pelicans. And so I'm not sure what has happened. Bill doesn't normally make claims like that. He's not always right, but he normally doesn't make claims like that if he doesn't have someone that he believes, because he's not Woj or some guy who's trying to break news. That's not his job. So normally he's relatively trustworthy there, that he has a source who he trusts who's saying that. So I'm curious what's happened even over the last 24 hours that has somewhat made the public conversation there shift, at least the reporting on it. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how it kind of all plays out in the next 2 days.
All right, we got the deets here from Clay from the Daily Loud. Update: adult film star Mariah Mills says she's dropping her sex tapes with Zion Williamson, and she tells the Pelicans to trade him now. It's just absolutely incredible. I mean, right when I thought the NFL was kind of catching up with the NBA on the soap opera level, the NBA just pulls away once again. You can't compete with this.
Another spicy wrinkle in the story was after the first wave of the story came out, it was, kind of serendipitous is I guess the only way to put it. But Zion did this whole press obligation, I think it was the following day or 2 days later, where he, a great move, donated a ton of money to this children's school, if I'm not mistaken. And then they did a wonderful job of promoting it. And it was Pelicans PR doing a great job, doing God's work out here, just trying to clear Zion's name on Twitter search. And then, a matter of days later, it's right back into the Twitter zeitgeist with Mariah firing off some more spicy tweets here. So, yeah, I guess, Pelicans PR did not win the day.
Mariah's had I know she just got suspended, but seems like she's getting the bag. She's from a data perspective gone up to the 28th top porn star on Pornhub.
From a data perspective.
OnlyFans subs.
OnlyFans subs
gift.
way higher. Impressions way higher. I mean, she's getting the bag here. She's got Zion's
It's
going to pay
brilliant
her. I mean,
marketing, to be honest. Like, I mean, like,
That's
who,
the
you know,
funniest
Clay
thing
didn't
you've
go for
ever
it.
said.
I'm a married man. I'll give some
From a
data.
data perspective.
I mean, she's trending. She might have gotten.
I'm sure you were only
just a little
looking at
research.
spreadsheets involving Mariah, nothing
just a
else.
little- I mean, I'm interested in internet traffic just broadly, and you know,
Oh man,
Zion knows in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't care. The one thing, going back to Zion, just real quick from an NBA perspective, I do think he's an He's only 22, and he's averaged 25.8 points while he's played on 61 effective field goal percentage. He shot 60.5% from the field in general. So, like, I do, if he's healthy, I mean, Mark said he's like a top 5 player. I don't think that's true, but he's definitely a top 10 or 15 player. And if you're Portland trying to keep Dame, I mean, that's a gamble. I agree. I think Zach Lowe, actually, on his most recent podcast with Bobby Marks, was saying he doesn't know how to evaluate Zion. I'm in another like NBA chat, and we were talking about how to evaluate him as an asset. The potential's there, and Portland's, I don't really see a path to them winning with Dame outside of some big gamble or pressing the reset button trying to get young. So I don't know. Zion's is a very interesting case from an NBA perspective because his good is very, like, when he's on the court, he is a really talented player. And he's only 22. I mean, that's crazy. He's 22 still.
We see those reports talking about if Brandon Ingram is the more desirable trade asset opposed to Zion, and that's like a pretty, I don't know. I mean, clearly Zion has like the way bigger upside. I'd be curious to hear like what y'all think about that, because I think that was a pretty polarizing report. That I don't think carries a lot of water. I think it was in reference to the Hornets too, but I think it's one that's definitely an interesting debate topic. Dink, you have any thoughts on that matter?
Yeah, I mean, Ingram's gotten a lot better in the last few years, but generally, like, I guess the way that I'd put it is, look, the Pelicans had a bunch of different injuries at different points last year, but when Zion went down, they were near the top of the Western Conference standings, and Ingram got back and was like the lead guy, and McCollum did get hurt at different points. They lost like Alvarado at different points. They had a lot of guys going in and out, but the team just kept kind of dwindling down the standings. And so I just don't know. Ingram's one of these classic guys that for me are really, really hard to build a team through because they're not quite efficient enough offensively to be like an elite offense, and they want to use enough possessions that it makes it hard to do that. And he's not an elite defender, so it's kind of a lot of empty calories. So Ingram's a better trade asset if you're trying to sell tickets and whatnot, because he's probably going to play a little bit more frequently than Zion. But in terms of winning at a high level in the NBA, I think it's probably going to be pretty hard to do with Brandon Ingram playing as your best player or playing like he believes he's your best player in either one of those scenarios.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it also just kind of depends on what your team is and where you're set up. Like, if you are a team who is a very serious title contender right now, you probably would rather have Ingram because he's going to contribute to your team and contribute to wins. If you're the Lakers right now and you're like, all right, we can get one of these guys for free. Who do we want, Zion or Ingram? You probably want Ingram. But if you're team who, yeah, I know. If you're a team who sucks and, I don't know, I guess like the way I think about getting Zion is like, if he was just a 22-year-old prospect who hadn't played in the NBA and like had a weird injury history, people would be really excited about him probably. And like, I don't know, you can get him for a high draft pick and a little bit more. And you have this like, I don't know, the upside that is there is like, feels way more real than a third overall pick in the draft, where it's like, yeah, people think that Scoot's going to be really good, and he probably will be, but like we've seen Zion just like dominate other players in the league already. And so like that's the unknown to me there, is it's like, yeah, there's some, like, it's a different kind of risk, but it is a risk that you like theoretically as a team could manage to a certain extent, and you like what the upside is there if it hits.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I bet we see a lot of trades. This new CBA incentivizes a lot of behavior. I think we'll see a ton of movement. Atlanta could make some moves with their two guards. The Lakers certainly are an interesting spot. I know a lot of people like Austin Reeves. Zion's definitely a major piece. I'd be surprised if Ingram got moved. I mean, I don't know what the Pelicans are trying to do. I do think the third pick for the Trailblazers is definitely, I mean, I think they're a key piece just because could Lillard move? What are they doing? That third pick is valuable because it's clearly a top, it's really this top three is quite good. I mean, I think Scoot initially was viewed as like a for sure number one pick in most drafts, fell off a little bit. But he's definitely really, really good. Miller's a perfect piece, perfect wing. So I don't know.
Did the stuff I feel like when I was looking at early mock drafts, Brandon Miller was projected to go 2 and Scoot was to go 3. Was that a recent flip, or has that always kind of been up in the air who is going to go 2 versus 3?
It was always assumed Scoot was going to go 2 throughout most of the year, and then it flipped kind of in, I'd say, like the February, March timeframe, especially after the gun stuff got cleared up a bit. And now a lot of speculation is just because Charlotte has the second pick that it doesn't really make sense to have Scoot and LaMelo, but they're coming around, and I heard that they loved the workout with Henderson. I mean, he's a freak athlete. But again, it's a guard, and like I think overall, in general, there's a lot more guards in the league, and it's harder to find these like athletic wings that can do it all. And that's where, like, if I'm Boston, I probably would hold on to Jaylen Brown, even though his handle and going left has been a disaster. But I would. Wings are more rare than guards.
Would you guys rather have LaMelo or Scoot?
I'd
Scoot for me.
I'd rather LaMelo.
I like both those guys.
Scoot's just small, so it's hard to be like 6'3", 6'4", and be a dominant player in the league unless you're an incredible shooter.
And he's 6'2".
Yeah, so like and he struggled to finish at the rim in last year. But we'll see. Those are the knocks on him. I think he was a little bit too hyped up to start compared to Wembanyama. As like, I don't think he'd be a surefire number one pick in like other drafts. I think he's a surefire top 5 pick in every other draft, but I don't know that he's necessarily a number one. But the thing on the wings that's going to be interesting is like this draft in particular is loaded with wings. And I'm interested to see if this is something that starts to happen in the next few years. I'm not as up to speed on like what the Devi situation looks like in the NBA in terms of like 4 or 5 years out where the talent flow is coming in the pipeline. But obviously there has been for a long time this desire for wings and athletic wings in the league, and there's seemingly been a shortage. And then like you look at this year's class and it's like all these athletic defensive oriented wing dudes who can ball handle a little bit, but it's not necessarily their forte. And I wonder if we're just going to see more of those types of athletes coming through the pipeline, just in the same way that we saw like over time in the NFL, like mobile athletic quarterbacks, more of them just coming through the pipeline as the options and the alternatives, just as they're getting groomed at a younger age from that. And it always takes like a little bit of a delay for what's realized as valuable for it to like work its way up the development track. But this year's draft in particular, like it's mostly wings. There's very few like pure guards in the draft.
Shout out to Villanova's Cam Whitmore. I'm excited to see where he goes. He's such a weird player. I like him.
But on Wembanyama, what are you guys expecting from him in year one? Like, how quickly does he make the Spurs a contender? Is he going to be like LeBron year one, where he's just like immediately an impact player? Or is he going to be a bit more raw?
It's really hard generally for rookies to be great right away. Like that's really, really, really difficult. He's got about as good of a chance as anybody just because size-wise, it's just such a unique combination of skills. I don't think they're going to be contending for a playoff spot this year. That would be surprising to me. Maybe back end of the play-in type thing, but I think year 2, year 3, I think they'll take pretty big jumps, would be my guess. But he's it's impossible for him not to make an impact defensively, even if he doesn't understand what's going on defensively at the NBA level in terms of coverages and knowing teams' plays and different things like that, simply by his size and his length. Like, it's just incredible that he can block jump shots, like, kind of routinely with his length. And then offensively, like, he just moves so fluidly for a guy that size. I've really never seen anything like it. All these other, like, really tall, big dudes who get in the league, you're just worried about their bodies holding up because of the way they move. He moves so fluidly. It's very strange to watch, honestly. So I'm really excited to see what it looks like in the NBA, but I would be surprised if they're looking at, back into the playoffs this year. I think that's more of a year 2, year 3 thing for them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they leverage all those picks that they have kind of from the Dejounte Murray trade and all that, and like where they find themselves. Because I think there's there's a version of the team where Wemby's a little better than they expect right out of the gate. Not that they don't expect him to be amazing, and they're like, hey, you know what? We could be a 6 seed. Like I don't think that's like totally insane. They have a lot of young guys who I like in general. And so it's like maybe you flip Zach Collins and some picks for a guy, and all of a sudden your team is like able to contend on a night-to-night basis. But yeah, I think they'll be really fun. I think it'll probably feel a lot like the Thunder felt this past year. That's like kind of what I'm expecting, is like they're competing for the play-ins, and everyone's kind of just like, wow, Shea is really good. And then like now going into this season, I'm more, as a Thunder fan, like optimistic for them to like hopefully take it up another level. I would imagine the Spurs kind of feel that same way, but a year behind.
I think they're like a year behind this year. So like, I think next year they'll feel maybe a little bit more like this year. The difference also, like Shea a lot further along. And also it's when you have the ball handling situation figured out, which I think Trey Jones is okay. I don't think he's like a long-term solution there. It's going to look worse than it does when you have the young talent being the ball handler a little bit. Cause when you just kind of need, and if they have like a veteran point guard, like a Monty Morris or something like that, it would look a lot cleaner this year. I think it's going to look a little bit messy just because of the lack of experience on the ball handling side. But yeah, Wembanyama and Sohan and Keldon Johnson and Vassell is a pretty interesting starting point. I just think they'll probably need a little bit more consistency at the one to look like the Thunder did this year, which looked like to me like a very legitimate like play-in playoff contender. I think that's probably next year for San Antonio.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you also just have like the unknown of all of those young guys. One of them could not take a step forward this year. One could take a much bigger step forward than you expect. Especially with those guys like Sohan, I feel like is such a unique player. Like it's hard to really project like, oh yeah, he's gonna be a lot better next year or worse, or whatever that means.
I do think Wembanyama is a pretty decent favorite. I would say if you had to place odds of him being like an all-star, I'm super high on just how good he can be immediately. Obviously the injury is probably a big part of the equity where he doesn't become an all-star, is just minutes and how they manage him, and if he does get hurt, that's a big part of the chunk where he doesn't make an all-star team. But the bull case is that he's been playing against grown men. When he's gone and played against other men and young elite prospects, he's absolutely dominated. I mean, this year, I know it's not a super competitive league relative to some other leagues, but he averaged 21, 11, or 10.5 and 3 blocks a game. I mean, we just haven't seen a prospect like that. And to Drew's point, I just think like the size, even though he might not be used to the speed of the game and there'll be some adjustments, the size will overcome a lot of things that, he's so freakish. It wouldn't shock me at all if he was an all-star. I would think it's like 30-40% or something like that, which I don't remember a rookie having that much expectation outside of LeBron.
I think it comes down to if he can if he can get you 20 a night. If he's averaging 20 a night, then that was like LeBron's numbers like his rookie year. He averaged like 25 and 5, close to like 6 assists. So if he's giving you 20 a night, and then I think he's obviously just too tall to not soak up rebounds. If he stays close to the rim, he can be all across the floor, but just naturally defensively, probably marking the tallest guy, soak up a lot of rebounds. And then if he's getting you the stonks, like that's a nice situation. So I do agree in the upside. It's hard to imagine. I think LeBron's like a great, comparison case for rookie campaign. And if he's close to those numbers, I would say it's incredibly successful. But we obviously haven't seen anyone like LeBron since LeBron, so it's not the likeliest case. But Wemby definitely feels like the best chance for that to be the case, because him getting 20 a night does not feel preposterous with the clips that you're watching and how he moves, and his 3-point capabilities as well is insane. He's going to shoot over everyone, So I don't know. I'm kind of with you, Jennings. Like the bull case is incredibly bullish.
LeBron's made the All-Star team every year, but maybe his rookie, he's 18 or 19 All-Star appearance. I've seen different.
I don't think he made his rookie year, but every year since, yeah.
So it's probably a dog, maybe 30% is. I
think 30%.
But dude, think about it this way: if let's say he's like around that thing, he's a little worse than someone who might be more deserving. Don't you think they'd vote him in? Or like,
they'll already have him for the rookie sophomore games.
Yeah.
Like he's already going to be a part of All-Star Weekend regardless.
That's true.
It's tough to make All-Star teams. And it's been tough to make All-Star teams in the Western Conference for a while. Obviously, it's not as hard as going through the guard route that they've gone. But I mean, just think about the talent that's been added to the Western Conference with Kevin Durant and LeBron James, Anthony Davis. Jamal Murray feels like almost a lock to make the All-Star team this year, just because it's been so public that he hasn't made an All-Star after that run. So like, as long as he's healthy and producing, it seems like he'll kind of get the nod. So it's tough. I would put it more like 15%. And I think that's like a fairly optimistic take even. I think he's probably going to end up scoring wise. I would guess he's more like 15, 16 a night than 20 in the rookie year. It's tough to score 20 points a game in the NBA.
Totally. And I think too, his best chance of making the All-Star game is kind of like sliding into an injury replacement situation rather than making it outright. If you're putting on your NBA tinfoil hat, I do think there's some merit to the fact that him playing in the rookie sophomore game is beneficial for the overall weekend, because the All-Star game's going to get the turn in regardless. That now puts another marquee, entertainment matchup on for the NBA, with the rookie sophomores game having a little bit more of a draw on top of their Saturday night stuff. So you could see it. You could see them going that route, I think, too, perhaps, and not forcing him into the main game.
It is hard to make, but look at the bigs who made it last year. It wouldn't shock me. Jaren Jackson, Lauri Markkanen had an amazing year. Karl Anthony Towns is in the mix. Zion, I believe, made it last year as a starter. So it's I don't know. I think he has a chance. 15.
I think so too.
The right number.
There's what do you think the odds are that next year he's just better than Jaren Jackson Jr.? Is maybe a good way to think about it.
Jaren Jackson's pretty awesome this year.
Very unlikely. I think very unlikely.
Okay.
He's defensively, he just has a chance to be.
But the difference is Jaren knows everything that's going on, because he's been in the league for 4 years, and he's seen every team's sets and whatnot. So I think Wembanyama is going to be a better player than Jaren Jackson down the road. But right now, for this year, I think it's very unlikely that Wembanyama is as good as Jaren. Now, Jaren, we'll see if he can stay healthy. But
I feel like one of the things there is I am probably giving too much credit to his experience just playing against grown men in competitive environments, as far as ability to just kind of come in and produce. I'm sure there's a larger kind of learning curve that still exists there. But that's something that I don't find very valuable, just guesstimating how good someone will be rookie year.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to struggle with size or competitiveness or anything like that. I think just sort of a lot of defense is being in the right starting point from a positional standpoint. I think that's going to take time with coverages and whatnot. And the NBA plays very different than European basketball just in generally. So I think it'll take some time, but he's going to be awesome. He's going to be super exciting to watch, and they're going to be really fun. I am interested to see how it impacts Jeremy Sohan's development, who I thought had a really, really nice rookie year, but they tried to do a lot of things with him. They tried to put a lot on his plate as a primary ball handler sometimes. And a lot of the space that I think Victor is going to occupy is going to take away from some of the space that Sohan was successfully working in last year. So that's the one guy. I think we might finally see a really strong step forward from Devin Vassell, who was hurt all last year. I thought we'd see it last year, but Sohan is the guy who was really, really good in his rookie year, and Wembanyama, I think, is going to occupy a lot of the same space that Jeremy was getting comfortable in. So I'm interested to see his development in year 2.
Well, speaking of players next year too, and I know I've asked Andy this before on the show. Dink, do you think we can get NBA best ball blowing up? Is there anything we can do with the game where you could have sickos drafting 6, 7, 8 months out in advance?
I think the challenge, the challenge is just the calendar, right? Like how does Underdog offer contests that, compete for liquidity against the NFL? And you're never going to have NBA contests that can be anywhere near the same sizing as the NFL. So basically they can like comfortably start to unlock stuff as soon as NFL season starts, but that only gives you 5-6 weeks of draft period. It's not like if they released a huge NBA tournament right now, the lobbies would probably be pretty dry because everybody's still pumping into NFL stuff. So I love NBA best ball. I think it's a great game with a pretty strong edge right now, especially compared to NFL on Underdog, where I think the edge is quickly eroding. But I think it's a difficult task with where the calendar is now. If the NBA season started later, I think there would be more room for that type of stuff. But I don't think that's happening, because if the NBA season starts later, that means the NBA finals is in like July, when most people want to be vacationing and whatnot. So I think it's a tough thing where the NBA is always kind of competing against the NFL.
I feel like the play, at least just judging by me, which I feel like is a pretty good proxy of an NFL bro who's willing to dabble. I mean, like, I got so obsessed with the NBA playoff best ball contest. It almost seemed to make that like the flagship contest.
Yeah.
And blow that up, because then like your NFL teams are dusted by then, get that thing spun up. And then I was drafting all of those throughout December, and those were super fun. And I think the leap for NFL fans is just so much easier with the correlation elements, where I got overwhelmed by the season long stuff.
Yeah, the NBA seasonal best ball is really straightforward and like fairly easy, as long as you have like guide rails on positional allocations. Like, you can draft a pretty good team. You don't need to worry about correlation as much. The NBA playoff stuff is like so many levels of like trying to figure out. And the earlier you go on that, there was obviously a lot of value this year to the people who were drafting earlier and were on the LeBron and AD in the middle rounds, as opposed to where they finished in the early second round kind of thing. And so it'll be interesting to see if they put more assets behind that. It's a complicated game, but it's a really fun one, and it's one that my friends who don't play season-long fantasy, don't play DFS, still enjoy. Like, they enjoy that on Underdog as their way of associating with the NBA for the playoffs.
Yeah, I love the playoff best ball. And I'll be curious too, like, this playoffs was such an outlier playoff that it's really hard to even like take anything from, what happened. Like, how do you evaluate what was right and wrong when the 1 seed loses in the first round, which just like never happens? And so it'll be super interesting and exciting to like play next year.
Pete, what do you think? Can you grow NBA best ball, or is it just too much of a tough sled?
I think the playoffs is sharp. I mean, I enjoy those contests the most. I actually enjoy the NFL playoffs more than I enjoy the regular season playoffs in some ways too. I mean, it's all great, but yeah, I hope NBA just continues to grow in popularity. I mean, it's been fun. I think people love the pick'ems. Andy, I know you love the regular drafts as well. I do think the NBA will continue to grow as a sport, but from strictly a best ball perspective for the regular season, it's a harder product, and it's just at the wrong time from a seasonality perspective. Because even if you wanted to draft before the season, there's just so much going on the sports calendar. Whereas the NFL, like, we're in the dog days. There's nothing going on right now. There's baseball, golf,
Well, for what
a
it's
couple
worth,
other things.
I will be maxed out of PVM4 way too early, and we'll need something else to throw my money into. And so if they launch some NBA stuff before the NFL season starts, I'll be there.
I think the playoffs is the move.
I do too. I think, really build that up. But Dink, I can't help but notice, I mean, the ink was barely dry on the NBA season, and you're in my Bulldog contest that we're slow drafting together there. So you moved on quickly.
Yeah, look, got to get your sweats in, and after you tilt off a couple showdown slates in a row, and you look at the calendar, and it's just MLB, which is just not a sport that I'm investing in anymore these days. It's right to best ball. So I actually have on my to-do list this week is plotting my total best ball investment, and then by week how many drafts I want, across each platform, across each tournament, and so on and so forth. I have not figured it out entirely yet, but that's on my calendar to do. And yeah, the Bulldogs are fun. I'm on the clock in a few of those now, actually.
Yeah. Any early macro takes on best ball? Obviously, we're all fighting the wide receiver avalanches in these rooms. Anything else jump out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just obviously the underdog, which look, when you think of best ball, you think about underdog. That's the first place you think of. So it makes sense that it's the sharpest game out there and the sharpest competition out there. But yeah, it's really interesting ways to try to combat it from a wide receiver perspective. I think are really, really tough. You either have to kind of join in on the avalanche or wait and try to build with bulk later and try to build some hyper fragile type teams, which are more difficult. I think the really interesting thing will ultimately be where does the late round value for these early drafters in June end up coming from? Does it come from a running back injury that opens something up in those teams that were allocating resources there? Or does it come from there's no injuries and it's basically the guys at the end that you're drafting are you just able to get guys who are playing, which right now the quarterbacks and the tight ends are the ones that you have to feel most confident in seeing the field. So it's a really challenging draft landscape. I felt like last year for me with underdog, I felt like I could just follow, good positional roster construction guidelines and I had a pretty good edge. And this year I feel like it's starting to get tougher and thinner out there. And I'm having to do things that are a little bit more contest specific. Since all the content is built around BBM4, I think people apply those BBM4 characteristics to other contests that are not appropriate. And that's where I think there's a little bit of edge still left.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, you said it, even just hopping in the Bulldog, and it is easy to get in your BBM rhythms with stuff and not think through how different the advancement structure can impact selections. Pete, I haven't seen you in the Bulldog streets yet. Are you getting in there?
I've had similar. I've done a couple best ball drafts, and last year I felt like there was a huge edge, wide receiver, some of the tight end stuff that's been prevalent for the last 4 or 5 years. And yeah, everyone's gotten sharper, and I'm excited. I'll definitely fire towards the end of the year, and just hope that there's some value in drafting later versus earlier, which, there's pros and cons, and there's a lot of research. ETR's put out a lot of good stuff. You guys have done a lot of great content around that. But yeah, the 2 kids now, golf season, I don't know. We'll see. I did a lot of drafts last year, but I haven't been itching to draft right now.
Well, Pete, I think it's a slippery slope. If you how this goes, right? If you keep it at an arm's length, you're going to do fine. And the second you pull the Band-Aid off, you do 1 or 2, then the fun don't stop.
I think I've done more best ball drafts than basically anybody. I mean, maybe Herzig.
All time? Oh, for sure. Yeah.
All time.
Yeah.
Because that one year I got 400K. Last year I had well over 100,000. I mean, I did a bunch of 3.
Yeah, I was trying to elbow you and be like, Pete, that's Yosemite National Park, one of the greatest vistas in the
yeah,
United States of America, and you were buried on your phone.
How about that? How about that night we had after the hike? And then I remember looking at my phone, and I was on the clock in 300 drafts, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, whoa for a few different reasons.
There might have been some drugs and other things involved that night that made that even more whoa for me. But yeah, I've stayed at an arm's length relatively so far. Yeah. And I do think the market's gotten a lot more efficient. Even I did some 3-mans, and the days of getting Travis Kelce, you used to be able to get Kelce and these tight ends super late relatively. No one knew to take them first. And I thought certain years there's clear tiers and things you could do. And it's just so much harder now. I'm not sure. I've done some drafts. I'm what is my edge in this outside of roster construction and correlation? And I don't know. I need to do some more research and try to figure out where I'm going to get edges, but it certainly seems more efficient relative to other years.
I honestly think tight end might be one of the ones because so much sentiment has now swung to the late 3 tight end builds. They're just so comfy. There's so many projectable starters late that I see that happening, and the elite tight ends are starting to fall. Now more you can just get George Kittle in the 6th round I know ETR is down on Kittle. Leone keeps telling me that his projection is a little too rich for his ADP or vice versa. But I do think like those 2 tight end builds, getting back to the Andrews, the Hawkinson, the Goddard, the Pitt stuff, those guys used to be 2-3 turn picks, before. So trying to figure out like what kind of tried and true things have worked historically that are just not in vogue right now. That's the kind of stuff I've been thinking about.
Yeah, I've been noticing that as a person who's almost 70 deep in BBM4. I've been noticing that like a lot of the early hundreds tight ends as well, like Goddard slips a lot, and I just am taking like a naked Dallas Goddard, at like I think I took him at pick like 85 or 90 the other day, which was like way past ADP. And then like a lot of the round like 12, 13 tight ends are slipping a lot as well, where it's like you can draft Dalton Schultz at pick like 150, 160, and his ADP is like in the low 130s. And I've been feeling good about that stuff as a way to like try to differentiate a little bit, where sometimes I'll end up doing the like everyone's doing 3 tight ends last 3 picks or something like that. But if I can like get a tight end who feels a little bit better than Mike Gesicki or someone like that, like I'm not gonna like stick too hard to that strategy.
Yeah. Well, Dink, I guess we do have to go out on this note. Consigliere wants your breaking news on the latest $4 tournament released by Underdog, the Chihuahua. How are you attacking the specific contest format, 25 max, Dink?
I have not even looked at the Chihuahua, so let me look at the structure, and I can give some thoughts really quickly. But,
it's a very flat payout structure.
Yeah, the payout structure is nice. I like that. That's good to see.
You don't often see an Underdog contest where 10th place is around 10% of first. So that's nice.
So are these 25 max, and I assume these are just going to be a bunch of slows that people are filling?
No,
in.
it's fast only.
Oh, it's fast only. So fast only is great. I think like fast only are great tournaments to be able to attack, because if you end up like max entering slows, you're in like the same 20 with the same group of people. Like you just enter a bunch in a row, and you're drafting basically the same approach against everyone. My guess is like, if you think about it as these tournaments are a snapshot in time, and what are most people doing at this point in time, because that's going to fill in a few weeks would be my guess.
Less than that,
yeah. So like, what are people doing at this snapshot in time that you could potentially get an advantage on? And I think some of the things you guys are talking about right now in terms of like what the comfortable builds are, trying to find, well, like you stay within that wide receiver avalanche early, but if you find the falling ADP on a tight end or a quarterback or something like that, lean into that and go 2 there, and then try to attack with extra, resources dedicated to the other positions. Because I think most people are going the comfy route. Right now, it seems like of the either 3 quarterbacks or 3 tight ends, depending on kind of where they're making the early investment.
Any other final words for you guys before we get out of here? Clay, you still hammering these week 15 correlations out there, buddy?
That's a big question of the hour. Yeah, for Dink and Jennings is if you're looking for edge, I need y'all's thoughts on week 17 correlation. That was a big fad last year. Everyone's like still hot on the press this year, but I think we've advanced past that. I think if you're not correlating week 15 and week 16, specifically in dome environments in the El Nino year, you're behind. You're behind. You're behind. So would you care to confirm that bias by chance?
Pete, what do you think from a data perspective, Pete? What do you think?
Data perspective. It's my new tagline.
Data perspective.
I
Did you see Jordan Addison's new girlfriend pop up on Instagram?
No, I did not see her pop up on Instagram. I mean, I looked at all that stuff last year, and there's some correlation stuff that you can do. But yeah, week 17, I was more. I like all the sneaky correlation stuff, especially in like the really top heavy prize pools. Although I'm still on tilt from last year. I had drafted so many Bengals Bills teams and got some of them to the finals, and freaking had. I mean, obviously that game didn't play, so maybe people are still going to have some nightmares about that. But yeah,
really?
Week 15, that's interesting.
Shouldn't you be all the people who got burned by that are the ones saying correlation doesn't matter anymore because the game got canceled? You don't want to join that chorus? Please, I need anyone to tell the rest of the people correlation doesn't matter.
I'm still on tilt about that game, man. I just can't.
I'm just here as a bye week bro to report Pat Kerrane and the Bulldog taking multiple week 7 bye quarterbacks and tight ends on his teams. I want the FBI looking into it immediately as a bye week bro.
that's his accountant telling him to reduce his tax liability with multiple bye weeks.
Speaking of Pat, how good, I was literally talking to him about buying a piece of his team while I had everyone in all these high stakes tournaments, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we'll talk about it at halftime." That worked out really well.
If you watch our ship chasing live stream from that night, there is a point where Pat goes on mute and goes off screen, and I believe he was on the phone with you at the time there. So rare miss.
We were debating. We were talking about it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how much it's worth. And I was like, it's a perfect hedge for me. I'm loaded up on this game and all these contests. Yeah, mistakes were made. But one other just quick thing. Victor Wembanyama was going on JJ Redick's pod. He just announced that, and that drops tomorrow. So for anyone who's, I know we talked a lot about him. I think that'll be a great interview. I think Redick and Zach Lowe, Dink, those are my favorite people to consume NBA content from. So that should be really good.
There you go, Dink alongside JJ Redick at
yeah,
NBA
that's a little too kind, but I appreciate it.
That's true.
I was just going to say, Dink, you guys have a new podcast out. I haven't got a chance to listen to it about the draft. Anything else people want some more NBA content that they should keep an eye out for? Yeah,
the Established Run NBA podcast. We record on Mondays and Thursdays. We'll get another episode in tomorrow with Anthony Miko talking about NBA draft props and how to attack that market, as he is our draft prop guru across all sports, as he dedicates a lot of time to it. But check it out, Established Run NBA podcast. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you go 2 episodes back, you can hear me just rant harmoniously about the Denver Nuggets and their championship run, because it's been a great journey for them as a team that stole my heart over the years, becoming champs.
It was a very fun rant. I think it was like a good chunk of time that you were ranting. And sorry, who were you on the podcast? Gallagher didn't even speak for like 6 minutes.
A good like 8 minutes. I was just like, I couldn't stop. I couldn't help myself.
Good stuff. Andy, anything else going on in your neck of the woods?
Not too much. Working on some random things. Might be starting to talk about a AI project that I've been working on. Different thing. It's actually, I feel like you guys would probably like it. Actually, it kind of is like DraftKingsy in a lot of ways.
Okay, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so might start talking about that relatively soon. I think it'll be kind of fun. But no, nothing else too crazy. Trying to enjoy the summer. Looking to buy a set of golf clubs. I tweeted about it yesterday. I got a ton of really good input from people. I got people who were like, hey, I work at the NBA Superstore. Come by. I'll help you out. So thanks to everyone who gave me advice. A lot of club listeners.
There you go. All right. We'll have to get a club outing here again. Clay, anything for you?
No, I just want to give, Dink some flowers real quick on being an avid ETR NBA listener throughout the season. Great having you on the club, my man. Appreciate you and all the work you did over to make an enjoyable season for myself, grinding, on a pretty daily, consistent basis. So pleasure having you in the club, and yeah, appreciate your insight.
Appreciate it.
Jennings, it was great having you back in the club to talk some Nugs and, all of your future tea times with Nuggets wing players, it sounds like.
Gosh, that's going to be sad if Bruce Brown leaves. He's such a good dude.
That's going to be, now that is going to be the first thing I think of when I see Bruce Brown leaving in free agency, is Pete's going to have.
He's a pretty good golfer. He's getting better. He's grinding. He's a lot of these NBA guys. I saw Blake Griffin at the US Open. Historically, it's been the hockey guys and like the kickers and pitchers. NFL and NBA players are normally terrible at golf. Brown's trying to reverse that trend. Shane Battier, another avid golfer out there. There's some guys getting in the golf street. Some of these athletes. It's fun.
There you go. Appreciate you guys hanging out in the chat. And again, thanks to Dink for swinging by, getting us back to our NBA roots here a little bit. It was fun to talk ball. Looking forward to the NBA draft coming up this week as well. We will see you guys. Actually, is next week the 4th of July, or is it the week after that? I believe we have one more.
Reference of time.
Yeah, I think we should be back next week, but we'll be off for the 4th of July.
Yeah.
But appreciate you guys hanging out. We'll see you guys next week. For Pete, for Clay, for Andy, for Dink.